There are some glaring misconceptions held by many Western Transformers fans when talking about the history of the Transformers in Japan. Although they almost certainly originate from ignorance and a lack of information in English available to the early internet, these misconceptions have shaped the broader discussion of the franchise as a whole. Now, let me ask you, is the Transformers brand American or Japanese? More often than not, I hear many fans say the former, due to the Transformers branding, trademarks, and initial comics and cartoons being mainly driven by Hasbro, Marvel, and Sunbow Entertainment. Others may say the brand is Japanese because the first generation of Transformers toys were Takara products sold with new branding tacked on. However, while neither of these assertions aren't necessarily true, they are a gross oversimplification of the Transformers' history, and they're also just cringe as fuck, and just completely undermines a nearly 4-decade-long collaboration and the internal relations of the industry which shaped the Transformers as we know them today. The Transformers was a game changer for the Japanese robot fandom of the early 80s, and it wasn't something that came out of left field, having been built upon the established history of the mecha genre and its exposure to American audiences. To understand how the franchise evolved out of Eastern and Western sensibilities, we have to go back to where it all started. And I'm controversially not talking about Bob Budiansky or the 1983 Tokyo Toy Fair. In 1978, Spider-Man leapt onto Japanese television. A one-of-a-kind collaboration between Marvel Comics Group and Toei Company, Spider-Man's tokusatsu adaptation was the result of a licensing agreement between the two companies, all thanks to Gene Pelk. A liaison for Marvel Comics Group in Japan, Pelk saw the potential for the Spider-Man character overseas after he failed to capture Japanese audiences through Marvel's comics alone. Pelk approached Toei Agency, a TV and animation production company in Tokyo, to produce an adaptation of Spider-Man for Japanese audiences, in the same fashion as their wildly popular Kamen Rider and Sentai series of tokusatsu shows, based on manga by the influential Shotaro Ishinomori. Toei's Spider-Man became a ratings hit amongst Japanese children, partly thanks to the inclusion of Spider-Man's super robot, Leopardon. Legendary mecha designer Katsushi Murakami, whom Americans may recognize from his Go Lion and Die Rugger designs, designed a myriad of toys for the series, such as the Spider Machine and Leopardon itself. Released by Bandai subsidiary Popey, this toy sponsorship rocketed the popularity of piloted mecha being used in a tokusatsu series. Spider-Man. Building off of their successful Spider-Man series, Toei and Marvel collaborated once more, this time on the next entry in Shotaro Ishinomori's Sentai series, Battle Fever J. While Spider-Man was considered a loose adaptation of the American icon, Battle Fever J is even more loosely based upon Marvel's Captain America. Originally, the series was drafted as Captain Japan, and over time, Toei included other heroes from around the world as part of the cast, fitting better with the initial two Sentai series and establishing a trope which persisted in Sentai since. Although it's unknown why Toei couldn't secure a license for Captain America, Marvel did allow Toei to implement the character Miss America into the Battle Fever team. By this point, her costume was completely redesigned, only retaining the shield design on her chest. Of course, Battle Fever J couldn't go without a giant robot of its own, introducing Battle Fever Robo as the first mecha of the newly christened Super Sentai series. As Super Sentai continued with more iterations annually, Marvel's influence on each entry shrank gradually. By the time of the 5th Super Sentai season, Sun Vulcan, Marvel's only association with the franchise was through its final credit as a series co-creator, marking the end of Marvel's involvement with Super Sentai as Toei continued the franchise long after Marvel's departure. However, this is far from the end of our story. On Western shores, American toy company Mattel were creating their own franchise parallel to Toei's Spider-Man.
Imagine you enter the world of the Shogun Warriors.
The Shogun Warriors, an original mecha franchise for Americans consisting of characters licensed to Mattel from Popey. Starring then-popular robots such as Combatler V, Danguard Ace, and Yusha Raideen, the comic created by Marvel merged these robots into a shared original universe, completely unrelated to their original appearances in their respective anime. Series creator Doug Moench was approached by Stan Lee to write the tie-in comic, specifically because Moench's children enjoyed playing with Poppy's toys. Shogun Warriors proved to be a successful template, which Marvel replicated when Hasbro approached them to create the tie-in fiction for the Transformers. Not directly related to either Transformers or the Shogun Warriors, but relevant to this topic is the cult Saturday morning cartoon, The Mighty Orbots.
Go, mighty Orbots. They're joining together to fight for what's right everywhere.
Orbots is another instance of an American and Japanese mecha-themed co-production that, while proving unsuccessful, felt like the prototype for the Transformers. Produced by MGM, Warner Brothers, and Tokyo Movie Shinsha, or TMS, Orbots had some of the most talented individuals in the anime industry working on it, with Osamu Dezaki being the series director alongside longtime collaborator Akio Sugino providing character designs, with the main character Rob bearing a stark resemblance to the titular character from the TMS anime Space Adventure Cobra, whereas the mecha itself is visually based on the robot from another popular TMS series, Six God Combination God Mars. Mighty Orbots especially ties into Transformers and its writing staff, which mostly comprises of future Transformers writers such as David Wise, Buzz Dixon, Donald F. Glut, and Douglas Booth. The show was even a personal favorite of Transformers animated co-creator Derek J. Wyatt, having influenced Wyatt's signature art style and designs for animated. In June of 1983, Hasbro representatives attended the Tokyo Toy Show of that summer, catching wind of Takara's latest releases in their Diaclone and Microchange toy lines. Hasbro wasted no time whatsoever acquiring the rights to these figures for sale in the United States and other Western countries, after signing a licensing deal with Takara on November 1st of 1983, a document which Hasbro still honors to this day by paying Takara Tomy annual royalties for selling their designs outside of Japan. Hasbro then wasted no time in developing their newly acquired Transformers line as a recognizable brand entity on par with their popular G.I. Joe toy line. Much like the aforementioned Shogun Warriors, the Transformers received a Marvel tie-in comic with a completely new setting and lore unrelated to the toy line's origins. At the same time, an animated series was being co-developed by Hasbro with Marvel Productions, Sunbow Entertainment, and Toei Animation, the same studio responsible for producing the animated series from which the Shogun Warriors originated from. By the 1980s, Toei had entered the animation outsourcing scene thanks to their good relations with Marvel Comics, having previously worked on Marvel's Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, as well as the television series and commercials for Hasbro's G.I. Joe reboot. Due to their extensive catalog of mecha anime, Toei must have seemed like the perfect fit for adapting Transformers for the television. The previously mentioned Gene Pelk, responsible for creating Toei's Spider-Man and establishing Toei and Marvel's partnership in Japan, encouraged Hasbro to place an order with Toei to produce the Transformers storyboards, penned by Marvel and Sunbow. Due to Pelk's positive reaction to the G.I. Joe toy commercials animated by Toei, current Toei Animation Vice President Kozo Morishita was appointed Chief Director of the Transformers series. This proved to be a tall order for Morishita, as Transformers eventually consumed a large portion of his career through the mid-80s. Having joined Toei's animation department by 1970, Morishita already had several robot anime directing credits under his belt, including but not limited to Dairugger 15, Lightspeed Electroid Albigus, and Video Warrior Laserion, and eventually going on to direct and produce some of the most recognized anime around the world, such as Saint Seiya and Dragon Ball Z, of course. Also working on the Transformers was Toei's Studio No. 1, a subcontractor responsible for the high-quality animation work on shows like Vanguard Ace. Many Japanese Transformers fans believe the detailed transformation sequences seen in the Transformers pilot episode are, in fact, Studio No. 1's work. The initial mecha designs used to adapt the Transformers to animation and comics were commissioned by Toei to Konam Productions, a small anime production house founded by ex-Ashi Productions animators, including the legendary animator Yoshinori Kanada, Mutsumi Inamata, Kazuhiro Ochi, and many more. By this point, Toei had developed a steady working relationship with Konam Pro, having previously commissioned design work for the aforementioned Albigus and Laserion anime. Konam Pro's main mecha designer and founding member Shohei Kohara, responsible for projects like Flores Sanshiro, Birth, and Windaria, was the individual responsible for creating the initial animation models for 8 of the original Transformers cast members: Optimus Prime, Sideswipe, Jazz, Prowl, Megatron, the Seekers, Soundwave, and his cassettes. According to Kazuhiro Ochi, Kohara created these models at Konami during Albegas's broadcasting period, suggesting a late 1983 or early 1984 creation date, predating any yet-to-be-published fiction. Ochi also mentions that Kohara achieved the Transformers' iconic appearances by viewing the toys from a rotating turntable. In fact, Konam Pro was eventually subcontracted by Toei for animation on the Transformers, alongside Ashi Productions and several other studios. This gives the show's first season a distinctly anime art style, unlike any Western cartoon airing at the time. It gets especially apparent in episodes like the 3-part pilot, featuring the first work by now famed animator Masami Obari, Roll For It and Heavy Metal War, featuring work by Nobuyoshi Habara of Ashi Productions, and other talents like Satoshi Urushihara, Kia Asamiya, and Hidetoshi Omori. Hell, even Konami Productions animator Hideki Tamura solo animated a number of action sequences during the 3rd part of The Ultimate Doom. This decision to allow Toei and Konami Productions to take the lead on adapting Takara's toys for animation proved to be vital in determining Transformers' success. Not only are they some of the most iconic cartoon characters that most normies can recognize today, but it set the bar for Transformers' art style and character designs moving forward, evidenced by the fact that modified Kohara models appear in the first issue of Marvel Transformers, while most of the rest of the cast hardly resemble their eventual animation counterparts. In spite of Kohara's efforts, however, Marvel Sunbow artist Floro Deary altered Kohara's designs ever so slightly for ease of animation, and ultimately received the end credit for Kohara's work. It's not even until later seasons where you can see which characters Deary was really responsible for, rendering characters who shared the same toy with completely different proportions and key details. The only Kohara character which saw a major overhaul by Sunbow Marvel was Megatron, with the initial model being used in comics and commercials having been based on a Gun Robo prototype, and thus only serving as the foundation for Megatron's future appearances. Despite all of this, the Transformers' embracing of the anime style and Japanese design sensibilities of the time gave Hasbro the upper hand against the competitor Tonka's GoBots in the eyes of many children, a show animated by Hanna-Barbera and featured character designs so similar to the toys they depict that they lacked any of the dynamism or rule of cool that the Transformers had. This didn't come without skepticism on America's part, however. In the beginning, even before planning to do pre-production, executive producers of Hasbro Toy Company, Griffin and Bacall, and Marvel Productions were mostly concerned if American children would watch a Japanese-styled robot TV show, remarked series producer Nelson Shin. And so Hasbro, Sunbow, Marvel, and Toei Animation created the More Than Meets the Eye miniseries to gauge children's reactions. Keep in mind that Americans still had a limited exposure to anime, let alone a conscious awareness of its existence. Voltron had only began airing on September 10th, 1984, 1 week ahead of the Transformers, and Robotech wouldn't hit American airwaves until mid-1985. Nonetheless, Hasbro, Marvel Sunbow, and Toei proceeded forth with the project despite previously drafting up a safer, more easily marketable concept for fiction based on Takara's material. It's not known to what extent Takara had influenced the production of the comics or the cartoon series in the beginning, if at all, but it was clearly a show intended for a Japanese audience from the get-go, assuming the Transformers proved successful enough in the US for Takara to embrace the rebranding. After all, the initial launch of the brand was treated as something of an experiment with children. Transformers being conceived with a Japanese audience in mind is most apparent in the age-old Jetfire Skyfire debacle, which understandably confuses fans to this day. In October of 1982, the Super Dimension Fortress Macross premiered on Japanese television and proved to be a massive hit, both on screen and in the toy aisle. The show's main toy sponsor, Takatoku Toys, released the hugely successful and detailed 155 scaled Perfect transforming Valkyrie figure, a toy which sold well over 1 million units in Japan. Being the best possible toy iteration of Macross's main mecha from that era, it was only a matter of time before companies overseas took notice of Macross's immutable success. By 1984, Tatsunoko, Artland, Big West, and Bandai, the four major companies now responsible for producing and financing Macross, were gearing up to release the franchise's film adaptation, Do You Remember Love, the summer of that year. Capitalizing on Macross hype, a swath of new 155 variants were to be released by Takatoku and eventually Bandai following their acquisition of the former company. Key amongst these new toys was Takatoku's VF-1S Super Valkyrie, the very toy which Hasbro eventually drafted up a Transformers bio for by April of 1984. Hasbro's new Transformer, named Jetfire, was patented for Hasbro that same month by a company called Matsushiro, the actual company which engineered the 155 scaled figure and briefly held the molds during Takatoku's acquisition by Bandai. In fact, this is where the first variants of the Transformers Jetfire came from, notable for the Macross kite insignia on their wing and the Matsushiro stamp on the underside. After the acquisition, Bandai removed any references to Macross and placed their stamp on the figure after fulfilling the rest of Hasbro's orders, making the Bandai release of Jetfire the most common version of the toy. By July 10th, 1984, the Transformers episode which Jetfire was scheduled to appear in, Fire in the Sky, was drafted and retained his initial Fluoro Dairy animation model and name. However, this quickly presented a dilemma for the series producers. If the show were to air in Transformers' other major potential market, Japan, there was no way Jetfire's inclusion could be feasible. Not only could Jetfire's toy obviously not be released as part of the Transformers overseas, being a competitor's product that goes against Hasbro's binding agreement with Takara, but the television series could in no way advertise said toy to Japanese kids. The episode's final draft, dated July 19, 1984, removed all references to Jetfire in its script, with Sumbo and Toei conceiving an entirely new character for the animation, Skyfire. And just 2 days after that, Macross Do You Remember Love hit Japanese theaters to resounding fanfare. Despite Hasbro and Sunbow creating Skyfire to accommodate Takara's needs in Japan, the show completely dropped Skyfire as a character after its first season, making the Jetfire toy an exclusive oddity to Hasbro markets. Nowhere does Harmony Gold's dub of Macross, Robotech, factor into this equation, and the assumption that it does is likely just an old rumor originating from the early internet days that just never really faded away. I believe a lot of these misunderstandings, assumptions, and the lack of clarity on the early days of the Transformers brand and its Japanese roots comes from a lack of English language sources discussing the topic. After all, being simultaneously an American and Japanese property, the only way to get the full picture is to break through the language barrier. A lot of my information came from Japanese language sources, like director Kozo Morishida's autobiography and tweets from various Transformers animators. Hopefully, this video helps to paint a more full picture of the unique international entity that the Transformers truly are.
せわしく動き回る枯れ果てた風に巻かれ二人で